My name is Leona. For 5 years, I gave my soul to Aura Logistics. I started as a junior analyst and worked my way up to director of operations. I knew every shipping route, every port code, and every secret to making a multi-million-dollar supply chain move like clockwork. I was proud of what I had built, but the true architect of the company was Grant Sterling. Grant was a man of immense presence and terrifying silence. He didn't shout, he whispered, and his whispers made people tremble. He was sleek, athletic, and possessed a mind that worked like a high-speed processor. He was a billionaire who viewed people as chess pieces, objects to be moved, sacrificed, or captured. I was his queen on the board. I solved the impossible problems, and in return, he gave me a life of luxury. It was a perfect professional marriage until the night the boundaries dissolved. It was a humid Friday evening in late August. The city skyline was glowing under a hazy purple sky. I was in the executive suite, finishing the logistics plan for a massive expansion into the Asian market. The office was quiet, save for the distant hum of the city below. I heard the heavy glass door slide open. I didn't look up, but the sudden scent of expensive leather and citrus told me exactly who had entered. "You're working too hard, Leona," Grant said. His voice was low and melodic, vibrating in the still air. "The expansion depends on these numbers, Mr. Sterling," I replied, keeping my focus on the data. "I want to make sure the margins are bulletproof." He didn't stay by the door. He moved with the grace of a panther, stopping right behind my chair. I felt his hand rest on my shoulder. It wasn't a brief touch. His fingers began to knead the tension in my muscles, his palms sliding down toward my collarbone. I felt a jolt of alarm. My breath hitched, and I sat up straighter, trying to create distance without being obvious. "Margins aren't the only thing that matters," he murmured, leaning down so close that his shadow swallowed mine on the desk. "Loyalty matters. Connection matters. I've watched you for years, Leona. You're a remarkable woman. You deserve more than a cold office on a Friday night." "I enjoy my work, Mr. Sterling," I said, my voice tight. I reached for my coffee cup just to move away from his hand. Grant didn't pull back. He walked around to the front of my desk, leaning against the edge, trapping me in my seat. "Enough with the Mr. Sterling. We're alone. I've booked a suite at the Gilded Lily. There's a vintage bottle of champagne and a view of the harbor waiting for us." This wasn't a business celebration. It was an ultimatum wrapped in a luxury invitation. "That's very generous," I said, my heart pounding in my throat. "But I have to decline. I have a long drive ahead of me, and I'm seeing my parents tomorrow." The lie felt heavy, but I needed an exit. Grant's eyes, usually a sharp, professional gray, turned into chips of ice. The mask of the caring mentor fell away, revealing the predator beneath. "Leona," he said, his voice turning dangerously soft, "don't play games. I've invested millions in your career. I've given you a seat at my right hand. I expect my inner circle to be available. I am available for every board meeting, every crisis, and every late-night flight," I said, standing up and grabbing my laptop bag. "But I am not available for a hotel suite. I'm an executive, not an acquisition." The silence was deafening. Grant stood up slowly, his tall frame towering over me. The atmosphere in the room turned freezing. "You think you're here because of your talent?" he hissed. "You're here because I allowed it. I built the pedestal you're standing on. If I move my hand, you don't just fall, you disappear." Then I'll take my chances, I replied. I walked past him, my skin crawling. I didn't wait for his response. I headed straight for the elevators, the sound of my breathing loud in the empty hallway. I drove home in a daze, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I told myself he was just frustrated. He was a man used to getting his way, and he would be professional by Monday. I was wrong. Grant Sterling didn't wait for Monday. The next morning, Saturday, I woke up and reached for my work phone to check the overnight shipping reports. The screen was black. I tried to restart it. Nothing. I opened my laptop to log into the company portal. Access denied. My stomach dropped. I rushed to my car and drove to the office thinking it was a technical glitch. When I arrived at the entrance of the Sterling Plaza, the security guard, a man I had known for years named Miller, stepped out and blocked my path. "I'm sorry, Leona," Miller said, looking at the ground. "I have orders. You're on the no-entry list." "Miller, what are you talking about? I'm the director of operations." "Not according to the memo sent out at midnight," he said, handing me a single sheet of paper. It was a legal notice. My contract had been terminated for gross misconduct and theft of company data. It was a lie, a complete, calculated fabrication. I looked up at the top floor. Grant Sterling was standing on his private terrace, looking down at me. He raised his glass in a mock toast, a cold, victorious smile on his face. He hadn't just fired me. He was going to destroy my reputation so completely that I would never work in this industry again. The war had begun. For the first 48 hours, I lived in a state of shock. I sat in my apartment, staring at the walls, waiting for the phone to ring, waiting for Grant Sterling to tell me it was all a cruel joke. But the only calls I received were from colleagues who had been my friends for years, calling to say they had been advised not to speak to me. Grant hadn't just locked the office doors, he had built a wall around my life. By Monday, the situation turned from a nightmare into a war. I opened the local business journal to find a headline that made my blood run cold. Aura Logistics Director fired amidst allegations of corporate espionage. The article was a masterpiece of character assassination. It claimed I had been selling shipping secrets to a competitor in Singapore. It was a lie so big, so bold, that no one would believe I could have made it up. My name, which I had spent a decade building, was now toxic. I picked up my phone and called my lawyer, a sharp woman named Nora Sterling, no relation to Grant, though she hated him just as much. "Nora, you saw the news," I said, my voice cracking. "He's lying. He's making it all up because I wouldn't go to a hotel with him." "I know he's lying, Leona," Nora said, her voice calm but grave. "But Grant Sterling is a man who buys his own truth. He has the server logs, the witness statements from people who are too afraid to lose their jobs, and a legal team the size of a small army. This isn't just a wrongful termination case anymore. This is a fight for your survival." "What do I do?" "We file a countersuit for harassment and defamation," Nora replied. "But be prepared. He will go into your past. He will look at every bank statement, every email, and every mistake you've ever made. He won't stop until you are broken." I spent the next week in a small, windowless room at Nora's office, going through my personal records. It was exhausting. Every time I tried to apply for a new job, the response was the same. Silence. I was blacklisted. Headhunters who used to beg for my time wouldn't even return my emails. I was sitting in a coffee shop on a rainy Wednesday when I saw him again. Not in person, but on the television mounted on the wall. Grant Sterling was giving an interview about the integrity of the global supply chain. He looked calm, powerful, and utterly untouchable. "We must protect our data," he said into the camera, a small, knowing smile on his face. "Trust is the only currency we have. When that trust is broken by someone in a position of power, the consequences must be absolute." He was talking to the world, but he was looking at me. He was telling me that he had won. I felt a surge of cold, hard clarity. Grant thought I was a chess piece he could discard. He thought I would hide in my apartment and wait for my savings to run out. He didn't realize that in 5 years of managing his logistics, I hadn't just learned how to move cargo. I had learned where he hid the bodies. I left the coffee shop and walked straight to a public library. I didn't want to use my own computer. I logged into an old encrypted cloud drive I hadn't touched in 3 years. Back when I was a junior analyst, I had discovered a glitch in the tax filings for one of Grant's offshore accounts, a project called the Nautilus Initiative. At the time, I thought it was an honest mistake and fixed it, but I had kept a copy of the original unedited logs just in case. As the files downloaded, I saw the numbers. They didn't add up. Millions of dollars were moving between ports that didn't exist, carried by ships that were registered as scrapped. Grant Sterling wasn't just a logistics king. He was running a ghost fleet. I had the fuel. Now I just needed to find the person brave enough to light the match. The documents in the Nautilus Initiative were more than just evidence of tax evasion. They were a roadmap of a shadow empire. Grant Sterling wasn't just moving electronics and consumer goods. He was using his ghost fleet, ships that officially didn't exist, to move unregistered cargo across international waters, bypassing every regulation in the book. I knew that if I went to the police immediately, Grant's legal team would bury the files before a judge ever saw them. I needed a shield. I needed the media. I contacted Julianne Thorne, a veteran investigative reporter known for taking down corporate giants. We met in a crowded subway station, the loud screeching of the trains providing the perfect cover for our conversation. "This is dangerous, Leona," Julianne said, looking at the decrypted files on my tablet. "If Grant Sterling finds out you have these, he won't just try to fire you again. He will try to make sure you never speak to anyone ever again." "He already destroyed my life," I said, my voice steady despite the fear. "I have nothing left to lose but my truth. These ships, they are docking at private terminals in the middle of the night. Look at the weight logs. They're carrying something heavy, something not on the manifest." Julianne spent the next 3 days verifying the coordinates. On the 4th night, she called me from a burner phone. "You were right. We tracked one of the scrapped tankers, the Iron Petrel. It just docked at a private pier in New Jersey. My team caught it on high-resolution drones. They aren't moving cargo, they're moving illegal raw minerals." The trap was set. But Grant Sterling was a man who always had a backup plan. The next morning, I received a hand-delivered note at my apartment. It wasn't from a lawyer. It was a heavy, cream-colored card with a wax seal. "Leona, I underestimated your spirit. Let's resolve this like adults. One last dinner. My penthouse, 8 p.m., come alone, and we can discuss your reinstatement and a very generous silence fee. If you don't show up, Julianne Thorne's career will end tonight." My stomach dropped. He knew about the reporter. He was using his influence to squeeze the newspaper. "Don't go," Nora, my lawyer, pleaded. "It's a trap." "If I don't go, he wins," I replied. "But I'm not going as his employee, I'm going as his ending." I arrived at Grant's penthouse at exactly 8 p.m. The elevator opened directly into a living room that cost more than 100 houses. Grant was standing by the window, a glass of expensive cognac in his hand, looking out at the city he thought he owned. "You look tired, Leona," he said, not turning around. "This rebellion doesn't suit you. You were much more beautiful when you were obedient." "The Iron Petrel is currently being boarded by the Coast Guard, Grant," I said, my voice cold and clear. He turned around slowly, a small, arrogant smirk on his face. "Is it? My contacts at the port told me the inspection was canceled an hour ago. You see, money doesn't just move ships, it moves people." "I wasn't talking to the port authorities," I said, holding up my phone. The screen showed a live broadcast. "I was talking to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and Julianne wasn't at her desk. She was on a boat with their tactical team." The smirk on Grant's face didn't just fade, it crumbled. For the first time in the 5 years I had known him, I saw a flicker of genuine raw panic in his gray eyes. "You're bluffing," he hissed, stepping toward me. "The Nautilus files are already on a secure server at the Department of Justice," I said, backing toward the elevator. "Every ghost ship, every fake terminal, and every cent you stole is public record now. You didn't just lose a director of operations, Grant. You lost your empire." Outside, the distant wail of sirens began to rise from the streets below. They were getting closer. "I offered you the world," Grant shouted, his face turning a deep, angry red. "I would have given you everything." "You had nothing I wanted," I said as the elevator doors began to close. "Because you can't buy respect, and you certainly can't buy me." As the elevator descended, I felt the weight of 5 years of service and 3 weeks of terror lift off my shoulders. I stepped out into the lobby just as a fleet of black SUVs screeched to a halt in front of the building. The king of Aura Logistics was about to be checkmated. The elevator doors closed on Grant Sterling's shouting, but the silence inside the car was even louder. My heart was a drum, echoing against the metallic walls. I had done it. I had handed over the keys to his kingdom, but the fear hadn't left my body yet. It felt like walking a tightrope while the rope was on fire. When the doors opened at the lobby, the scene was chaos. Agents in windbreakers with FBI printed in bold yellow letters were streaming past the security desk. Miller, the guard who had turned me away just weeks ago, stood frozen as they swiped their badges. I stepped out into the humid night air. Julianne was there, standing by a black SUV, her face illuminated by the swirling blue and red lights. She didn't say a word. She just nodded. That nod was the most expensive thing I had ever earned. It meant the Iron Petrel had been seized. It meant the ghost fleet was no longer a ghost. But Grant Sterling didn't go down without a fight. The next morning, the news didn't carry the arrest. Instead, a fleet of high-priced lawyers hit the airwaves. They called me a disgruntled ex-employee with a history of mental instability. They claimed the Nautilus files were forged. For a few terrifying days, the world seemed to believe them. Grant was still in his penthouse, filing injunctions and freezing my remaining bank accounts. "He's trying to starve you out," Nora told me in her office, which was now filled with cardboard boxes of evidence. He knows if he can drag this out for 6 months, you'll run out of money and the public will lose interest. He's forgetting one thing, I said, pointing to a specific line in the tax logs. He wasn't just stealing from the government. He was stealing from his partners. That was the final crack in the glass. Grant had built his empire on the idea of absolute loyalty, but he had been skimming millions from the very men who funded his ghost fleet. When I sent that specific data to his silent partners, the protection around Grant Sterling evaporated. The end came on a Tuesday. I watched from across the street as Grant was led out of the building. He wasn't wearing his Italian silk tie. He looked small, his shirt rumpled, his hands bound in steel. He looked at the crowd, searching for a friendly face, but there were none. He had spent his life making sure everyone was beneath him, and now he had no one to catch him. The legal battle that followed was a marathon of depositions. I had to sit in a room and face his lawyers for 10 hours a day. They tried to break me, asking about my childhood, my past relationships, and my mistakes. But every time I looked at the empty seat where Grant used to sit, I felt a surge of power. By the time the judge handed down the verdict, guilty on 12 counts of racketeering and 3 counts of harassment, I didn't feel joy. I felt a profound sense of peace. The monster wasn't under the bed anymore. He was behind bars. I didn't take the job offers from the big firms. I didn't want to be a director in someone else's shadow. I took my settlement, found a small office in a neighborhood filled with trees instead of skyscrapers, and put my own name on the door. I learned that a no is the most powerful word in the English language. It can destroy a life, yes, but it can also build a brand new one. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video and share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to Storyline English. See you next time.